are we going to cover today in the next 30 minutes? Hopefully we can get through all of this. It's a lot of content that my colleagues are going to bring, and we are going to talk about sales and marketing reshaping ecosystem. Sales and marketing was sort of the easiest application of AI back what seems like a long time ago when Gen AI exploded on the scene. So we're going to talk about how that has shaped things, and will continue to reshape things. We'll talk about the impact on operational technology. My colleague Angela is going to come on and give us the view from her part of TBR's portfolio that covers that. And then we'll talk about all the challenges around scaling sovereign AI, really all the challenges around AI as a whole. So who are you going to hear from today, as Haley mentioned, are the other three. I'm on this webinar more as a way to take the Q&A that comes in and make sure we feed it into my principal analyst colleagues here, and ask questions myself as they go through their material and questions come into my head. So that's my fair warning to my fair colleagues that they may get questions they weren't ready for from me and from the audience. So with that, I will hand it over to Boz.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So kind of kicking off as the presentation today, as Patrick alluded, what are some of the trends that are shaping the relationship between technology and services providers, and looking in the front of the funnel, sales and marketing being the low-hanging fruit that we have observed being most impacted, the easiest kind of like a use case, so to speak, that everyone went after, and what does that mean to the ecosystem relationships between the partners going forward? So the two graphs we have on this slide are coming from our most recent digital transformation voice of the customer report we published right before Christmas. But again, it's kind of giving some sense of like how are vendors positioning themselves when they are pitching services to clients, to enterprise buyers, and how they actually introduce and thinking about the ecosystem as they're thinking about bundling, the various ways of bringing forward, using AI, and how does that impacts their sales and marketing go-to-market efforts, because each organization obviously have their own ways of doing it, but when they have to go together, they have to account for some of the new implications. So what we have observed, as I mentioned, is like those early adopters, kind of like they really cited the sales and marketing efficiency improvements as relatively the easy use cases for providing the technology value and the ROI. As those AI-enabled solutions really start to mature, we start seeing the IT services companies sought to leverage the productivity savings into expanded offerings, reflecting both the success of their customer zero use case. We all know well-documented customer zero use case is kind of like the widely used, as well as the opportunities to serve as data and AI orchestrators. But the IT services companies obviously have their limits, and clients have preferred technology vendors, which is leading the IT services companies to look to alliances to drive new growth. So we've seen this pattern before. But we do expect in 2026 the services companies to extend those alliances into devices, connectivity, and even silicon, requiring what we call multi-party alliances contract that will strain really the commercial models, the sales strategies, and the alliances leaders across the ecosystem. So it's a multi-party alliance is something that we have discussed in the past, that we're starting to see becoming more and more of a trend for everybody. So as we look into a little bit closer in some of the data on the slides, it's just curious to want to point out to the second to last attribute, essentially, that kind of had popped in the 2025 survey comparing to the 2024 survey data that vendors is pairing where it relies on the ecosystem partner to discuss the value of Gen AI. That's the graph on the left. But when you look into kind of like resonating again, reflecting on the need for thinking about through that partner ecosystem lens, because the top two attributes, I don't want to ignore them, but while they're kind of like the main ones, the way vendors pitching Gen AI solutions and services, they're more like the traditional consulting playbook. Let's fold AI into a broader digital transformation. That way, if we are not doing as well, it's hard to measure, failures or success. It's kind of like that's just the way the market usually goes after. So there's traditional ways of doing business, but also I think it's important to see that vendors are recognizing the value of the ecosystem as they go forward, as they're trying to drive some more measurable opportunities moving forward. Now, the graph on the right, it's interesting to think about how the incidence of the vendors that are discussing the technology agnosticism and proprietary IP was higher in 2025 than in 2024 data, which we see as a kind of more of a defensive move to mask any kind of a differentiation or thin differentiation for that matter. A further push into the proprietary offerings is certainly can be a danger for ecosystem relationships, which could require a balancing act as buyers remain more hesitant when services vendors try to act as product companies and vice versa. Which kind of goes to the next thing is like most of the vendors are really starting to call themselves as ecosystem orchestrators, which essentially goes back to the comment again I meant about the advent of multi-party alliances, which ecosystem orchestrator really means they bundle hyperscaler SaaS tools and startup IP into a single solution as they pitch the idea during client meetings. We, in conversations with enterprise buyers, they certainly recognize and experience that multi-party construct. It's really challenging to, to untangle and see, the biggest challenge that buyers, I should say, have is, who's accountable for managing those relationships and what's the accountability level and what's really the transparency level between the parties. So buyers are not opposed to it, but it's about understanding like who leads, who manages the relationship behind the scenes as well. Because at the end of the day, from a services perspective, heavy reliance on the hyperscalers and the SaaS partners, remains central to vendors' approach. So this is something that they cannot escape, but they have to think about, differentiation. So, in the past probably 10 years, it has always been about scale, which continues to be a factor. But I think the differentiation now with the multi-party alliance construct, I think will become more of a conversation around depth and depth of capabilities, and again, introducing and using some more innovative IP brought by the startup. So kind of to wrap up the slides here, it's again about understanding what's changing and then the sales and marketing motions being impacted by the AI, and how does that translate into the ecosystem relationship as what's coming next is the multi-party alliances construct in those relationships. Without turn it over to Angela.
I just want to.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
I want to put a pin in something, Boz. You mentioned the multi-vendor partnerships, alliances,
Yep.
agreements, putting stress on the commercial model.
Yep.
Let's come back to that at the end. I just want you to talk a little bit more about that.
We'll do. Yeah. Yep.
Angela.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. And thanks for going first, Boz. I think I'm going to use your multi-party orchestrator line in here, too. So the prediction and trend that my team, the infrastructure team here at TBR, focused on at the turn of the year was really around how AI alliances will shift specific to edge, and how those alliances are more important than ever, and will certainly have an impact on the marriage of IT and OT, operational technology. So edge itself is obviously a very well-established trend. So I think a good place to start might be, what is kind of the same here and what is different because of, all of the changes we've seen in the AI landscape over the last couple of years. So what's the same? AI and edge have gone hand in hand for a while now. Like machine learning, computer vision, many types of applications leverage AI at the edge, and really we're just seeing kind of further proliferation or further use cases and expansion. Joint go-to-market has also been a common theme when it comes to edge solutions, edge computing. It's been hard to scale a lot of these solutions because they're very vertical driven and very use case driven. They often are some combination of industry ISVs, OT players, as well as IT players as well in the mix. So what is different now and will be different going forward? So first and foremost, NVIDIA is now on the scene and is one of these ecosystem players that would not have been playing in a leadership or pivotal role in edge the way that NVIDIA will be today, really providing the groundwork for a lot of the AI applications that will be running at the edge. SIs more important than ever as part of this relationship dynamic. There's a couple of reasons for that. So, we see that, first of all, increasing marriage of the IT and then the operational technology, that the NVIDIA layer adds complexity that many IT teams do not know how to manage. And that ultimately, from a knowledge perspective, but also as from a cultural and skill set perspective, we see that service provider systems integrators are going to be really a key piece of the puzzle to bridging IT and OT in some of these more advanced edge solutions. Like we've seen quite a bit of focus, and we expect to this year in high tech manufacturing, opportunities where vendors can provide better safety, better accuracy, better utilization, are all really kind of ripe opportunities at the moment where we see some significant investment happening. I think one of the other reasons we expect edge AI to be growing at a relatively increased rate this year is because there are use cases within the edge that do not require customers to invest in or lease capacity from rack scale compute systems that might be in a neo cloud or a tier one cloud. A lot of this compute can be conducted at the edge or at these locations. And NVIDIA has also, kind of foreseen that as well, and is now promoting their own hardware for these edge locations that they'll also be producing with their OEM partners. So like NVIDIA RTX, IGX Thor, these are only going to help satisfy the need to address the desires to adopt AI, while also overcoming some of the cost barriers and challenges around gaining access to rack scale systems. So achieving AI in a more cost-effective, affordable, accessible way. So really, I think kind of to pull back Boz's note on orchestrators of these multi-party alliances, we see within these alliances, NVIDIA, we see infrastructure OEMs, OT OEMs, ISVs. We really see the services providers as an essential piece here to help bridge the gap across these customers or across these vendors. And as Boz was saying, for the customer, helping to orchestrate and have a point of accountability and execution on these. So from there, I will pause and hand it over to Alan.
And before we get to Alan,
Okay.
Angela, I just want to put
Sure.
a pin in two questions for you. One around IoT, as you called it, a marriage. Like to maybe expand on that a little bit and sort of what's going to be required. But then also, when we think about edge, we think about compute, and we think about cost. But I'm wondering too about connectivity and how you think that's going to change the ecosystem. So we'll come back to that at the end. Alan, let's go to you.
All right, sounds great. So I'll focus on the sovereign AI market overall. I think it's going to be challenged as we go into 2026. But I want to take a step back and just look at, some of the opportunities for AI in applications where sovereignty is really important, because a lot of it is in the government sector, where the efficiency and cost reduction has been at the forefront over the past 18 months, but really overall, right? So wherever tax dollars can be more efficiently used, that is something that is very focused upon and desired. And so AI has a lot of applicability there. It can, make some of the customer service and citizen interaction use cases that the government plays, just has a lot of, do more effectively, do more efficiently, and reduce some of the costs involved. So I think there's a big value proposition overall for AI in sovereign applications and in government applications. And so that's why it's a big focus. So when we look at what some of the challenges are from an ecosystem perspective for scaling the use of AI within those type of circumstances, I think the AI talent is at the forefront. It's really kind of a symptom in some ways of the way that government solutions are implemented, where SIs and third parties are involved in, creating, moving forward, implementing, and supporting those use cases. And it's underlined by, that lack of skills is underlined by a couple different things. First is just there's two layers to think about, the physical and the logical, in terms of how these solutions can be implemented in a way that is compliant and governed and regulated and then demonstrated. And so those are all challenges that need to be met. And when you have a new set of technologies, and in some ways, cloud is still a new set of technologies for these end customers, which are the governments or the regulated entities within those environments. That's all kind of an infrastructure challenge to build up and to have the isolation and the ability to demonstrate delivery within a certain geographic boundary. That is all part of the overall solution, but one that is still being developed in and of itself. And so there's actually been a lot of continuing development through the end of last year with new initiatives, new investments, multi-billion-dollar investments from some of the largest cloud providers in the world, but those are still being developed, never mind being demonstrated and proven over time in terms of their ability to not only deliver but be compliant and meet all of the ongoing regulatory challenges of just the underlying infrastructure. So that's a constraint. And then if we look at just layering AI in general on top of that, all of the data requirements where not only is the infrastructure, but also the data, which can be coming from multiple different sources, still needs to meet all those requirements. So there's a different layer of complexity and regulation that goes on top of that, that not only from the infrastructure level, there's challenges, but also from the third-party talent and services perspective, just building up those use cases that make other entities comfortable, move forward with certain initiatives and scaling those initiatives. So that's just the AI layer. And then on top of that, now we have, so the technology is constantly changing and evolving, which is great. However, when you get into things like agentic, where it's not only providing insight and analytics on data that you need to be able to demonstrate is being done in a compliant way, but also making decisions that you need to demonstrate is being done in a way that complies with multiple different regulations and compliance and security concerns. Just all of that creates a very challenging environment to implement things like sovereign AI and agentic sovereign AI at scale. So there's going to be, I think, a lot of developments over the course of 2026 that makes these solutions more available to reduce costs, to increase efficiency, and do it leveraging the infrastructure build-outs that are occurring as we speak and will occur throughout 2026. But the talent on top of that is really what's needed to be able to scale that in a global way, in a way that is compliant, and with all the different regulations, and those third-party SIs are really the best at keeping track of that and ensuring that their clients are not only getting value, but doing it in a way that reduces their risk and addresses all of those concerns that they have. So that's a long-winded way of saying it's a very complex market. There's going to be a lot of value there for sovereign use cases, but 2026 is still kind of the investment and evolution year in terms of how that can all be done in a way that meets the requirements of most multinational large enterprises.
Excellent, thanks. And what I think we'll do, I want to go to Boz next to sort of wrap up the full ecosystem picture, but I want to say, we'll come back to you, Alan. I am curious if you could maybe talk a little bit about since you've been doing cloud for a long time, the lessons learned from the evolution of hybrid cloud that might be applied as sovereign cloud, sovereign AI begin to sort of threaten to balkanize tech and data. I mean, whether or not there are lessons learned, but we'll come back to that, Alan. First, let's go to Boz for the last big slide of the day. And sorry, I'll jump ahead on it. Sure. And Boz, take it away.
Sure, thank you. And I think kind of the slide we have prepared here, I probably is going to start answering some of the question you were saying you're going to pin down a little bit earlier in the conversation around the commercial constructs of the vendors. Why we put this slide at the end was essentially all the technology in the world can be great and integrated, but if partners don't align on the commercials, it's going to be ever challenging because at the end of the day, they're all in the business to make money. So yes, technology integration, risk assessment, sovereign, the different parts of the ecosystem, IT, OT, all these pieces are absolutely critical, important, but the commercials comes to like really the critical elements should be aligned and going forward. So the graph we have here on the slide comes from our Voice of the Partner report, which is part of a series of our ecosystem intelligence series we published in 2025. And you can see this data was updated from comparing to 2024. Just to kind of orient to some of the data and some of the findings we got out of it. Really, vendors, as we have pointed out, lean on well-established commercial models to drive the partner-enabled opportunities, which was very much similar to the last year's results, to the 2024 results. As vendors on both sides, technology and services, really remain cautious about experimenting too much. They kind of try to minimize any kind of a disruption. What we started observing is that uptick in the respondents that are seeking revenue sharing fees will likely test the limits of the vendors' trust with each other. Others, especially the Gen AI and agentic AI, compels them to structure the commercial constructs creatively, while the deploying outcome-based fees at scale will likely take time. As much as there's a lot of aspirations at the moment, the vendors still need to consider some of the implications on their own operating model first before aligning with their partners. So what does that mean? So for services companies need to be contemplate how to handle transitioning from labor to tech-enabled arbitrage. And what does that pyramid going to look like? Because as we know, services companies have traded and continue to operate on a human-first kind of a delivery model. For the cloud vendors, they need to find ways to help clients retire their technical debt first, while also moving to the consumption-based models. We know that, and we started to see some kind of an indication that we went from licensing software to SaaS-based model, now the consumption-based model, and some of the technology vendors are thinking about going back to the licensing agent. So maybe the licensing, software may be coming back to in fashion. And then for the OEM providers, shifting from selling boxes to devices as a service is something that those providers have tried with various degrees of success. Now they have to change customers. Now that they have to change customer based on realized value of business outcomes, as they're building on or embedding any kind of a telemetry or monitoring tools to track usage, performance, and business impact can help them get closer to achieving this goal. What it all boils down to, and we have it on the slide here, it's all about transparency, because as the vendors within the ecosystem think about those creative ways to servicing clients, to commercialize the opportunities as a result of AI, agentic AI, Gen AI, buyers do demand more greater transparency as they entertain those new offers, as they entertain those new bids for work, because buyers do want to see what they're actually paying for. You asked a moment ago, what have Alan learned from cloud over the last, how many years he's been tracking cloud. One thing we know and we have seen in the market is that cloud it turned out not to be as cheap as it was originally promised, and buyers are very hard to be sold on any kind of a new technology. So, vendors have to be very careful how they position all of these new technologies, AI, agentic, and so forth, so they can avoid undermining any trust as they're trying to also at the same time adjust their own business model. And that transparency goes within the ecosystem as well. As services companies talk about outcome-based pricing and talking about client retention, cloud providers still talking about SaaS-based sales, as I mentioned a moment ago, and thinking about consumption-based sales. They got to find ways to bridge that gap. And transparency is the first step. And I think this is where we're going to start seeing opportunities evolve in 2026.
Thanks, and I'm glad you used the word transparency, because from the advent of ChatGPT, I think that's one of the things we've agreed we saw coming is just AI by its nature means increased transparency. And so what does that mean across the ecosystem? So Angela, I want to go back to you for a moment, if we could, and I'll give you two questions. You can answer one or the other or neither or both. Just thinking about what you were talking about and the IT, OT, I've always thought of it as convergence. I like the word marriage better. It is a problem to be solved. It's a bridge to be built, but is it going to be built by humans, or do you expect that technology is eventually going to sort of quickly replace the human experience and the knowledge that's needed to build that bridge at the moment? And then I'm also curious on edge. As I said, compute cost, but connectivity, that was always one of the challenges around edge solutions. With 5G and now the emergence eventually now of 6G, connectivity seems to be a problem that's being solved. But does that mean that we need to introduce another party into the ecosystem in a more important way, more significant way? Are the connectivity players going to be an important part of this IT/OT convergence and this explosion around edge that you're looking at?
Sure, I think I can do two quick answers on both of those. So, will AI take care of building the marriage or convergence of IT and OT? In some ways, yes, but the reality is, I think humans will be very involved for quite a long time to come. And part of the reason I'm saying that is because I'm thinking more so about sort of the solution development stage and the number of players that are involved in these edge solutions. So first and foremost, NVIDIA making incredible technology and platforms, but a level of complexity that many IT teams have just not had experience with before, that requires humans with expertise to execute on effectively. And I think, as I mentioned kind of quickly at the beginning of the edge discussion, is really the concept that it's not the most scalable solution set. When we look across the many areas of IT, a lot of it would be great if things were more cookie cutter and scalable to more customers, but there's a lot of bespoke elements, and that I think also increases your need for human intervention. Although obviously there's many opportunities for automation along the way. Then on the connectivity side of things, do I see that changing? I think it's really going to come down to the industry vertical. Some of these solutions will be largely within factories or places with wired connectivity, but then we have a number of industries where that's not the case, and you'll see certainly connectivity plays a huge role there in terms of energy, utilities, and others, where that's another relationship that I did not mention in my previous outline.
Yeah, I think, and it's a really good point that the human element is important, not only for the experience and knowledge of being able to solve the problems, but then also being totally transparent, to use an important word. There is sort of the who's going to get paid for this, and is it going to be a human or is it going to be an agent when something goes wrong? as Boz likes to say, you can't sue a bot. So,
Yeah.
and when we're talking about OT, we're not talking about just turn it off and turn it back on again to make it work. So a lot more enterprise risk involved. So Alan, let's shift to cloud. And I don't know if my question made sense, but when you think about your experience seeing the evolution of hybrid cloud, are there lessons learned there when it comes to looking at what sovereign AI, sovereign cloud, and all that could potentially be doing to, again, balkanize technology and data?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've seen with hybrid cloud and even the shift from on-prem to cloud is that the data can have, this term data gravity, where the data that you have can dictate some of the decisions for the delivery methods and the type of solutions that are being used, because there are such large stores of data, and it's difficult, expensive, challenging from a risk cybersecurity perspective to move and to have that in multiple different places. So it does tend to change some of the decisions or direct some of the decisions for the types of services. And I think that we're seeing the same thing with the AI layer on top of that, where certainly the data is at the heart of it. However, moving, securing, ensuring compliance with data long-term, changes the way that AI will be delivered. And certainly, by extension, now you have agentic services on top of that, where the data may not be moving, but the insights from the data and the risk from the data can be moving. So all of those things are challenging. So I think, a lot of the hyperscalers are going to be homes for a lot of the data sources, because that's where the services have migrated. But there's also use cases where the AI connects to on-prem. So it's really going to be a hybrid set of services. Compliance, that logical layer, needs to follow regardless of where the data is. And I think all of those connections, security protocols, governance layers are what's being developed, and still not going to be resolved in the coming year. But that's what's at the heart of it. The data is what drives the AI, but the compliance and the security still need to be addressed, regardless of what third-party models and services are layered on top.
Well, I think one thing I just heard then, Alan, is, and I know at Technology Business Research, we're always looking at the company's business models, their strategy, their performance, taking that company-centric focus to the market. And everything you just said makes me think that when it comes to who will benefit the most, or at least who will benefit the most in the short term, it will certainly be the consultancies that have both the technology capabilities, but also that deep understanding and expertise around governance, around compliance, around risk, around security. So let's wrap up very quickly now. Again, to emphasize that we do look at companies first to build up our understanding of the market. We haven't mentioned many companies. I only just alluded, I just did before, I didn't even say the names of the companies. Angela, you're the only one that really has mentioned the company by name, so I'll let you go first, and then Bob and Alan, you can maybe touch on everything that you said and everything you heard today. Which 2 or 3 or 4 companies that you cover and you look at do you think are going to benefit most in 2026 from all of these trends? So Angela, in addition to NVIDIA, who else is on your going to do really well this year list?
Well, from the infrastructure side of the house, the infrastructure OEMs will certainly benefit on the edge compute side. Like Dell comes to mind, but Lenovo actually has a really strong edge play as well, as does HP. Then with the edge ISV set, it's almost so broad in terms of being specific to individual use cases, it's hard to call it specifics, but I would say from a use case point of view, I think some big focal areas of the industry include automotive manufacturing and then other high tech manufacturing, like in the literal technology components type of space.
Yeah, and I know one company that Boz and I have spent some time with last year that I think will probably do well this year, as Edge picked up, is Hitachi Digital Services, building rail cars, not auto cars, but same cars.
Yeah.
Boz, how about you?
Yeah. So just thinking through what we discussed today, I would say, I mean, obviously the professional services companies are facing a big challenge ahead of themselves, given all the implications of AI. But probably from an ecosystem perspective, there's a great opportunity for KPMG, I would say, as a firm that has been really putting, a lot of effort and resources and really investments behind the build out and expand the ecosystem. As they look into what's next in terms of opportunities. So KPMG is kind of jumpstarting the relationship with SAP, really leaning heavily on Microsoft, really looking into the Salesforce, that front office opportunities along the way. So, they're definitely well positioned given their governance, risk and compliance, heritage. They have been building a lot from a resource delivery perspective and knowledge management capabilities. So there's that. Another one to think about, some of the India-centric vendors, they always kind of they continue to do well, despite most of them do well, despite of the threat that has been discussed in the last 3 years on the labor arbitrage model. I would say probably Infosys still manages a really commands like a strong kind of a voice within the ecosystem, and partners do come to the company for their both engineering capabilities, but also the delivery execution that they're known for. So they do well. And maybe somebody who maybe not many people think on the call today is probably Fujitsu, just to kind of think of them as a company that is historically and continues to be predominantly in Japan, but they're looking at the Americas market as an opportunity for them to build out, and our partners are part of that expansion efforts as well.
So the bottom line, if you play well in the sandbox, you're going to do well as the ecosystem evolves.
100%, yeah.
And Alan, let's wrap up with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the global hyperscalers are going to have a big role in terms of building out that infrastructure that supports sovereign cloud, which supports sovereign AI on top of that. But it also opens up opportunity for both, regional players that focus on that logical layer on top of the infrastructure. So, the global firms have dominated even in some of those European regions, but firms like Deutsche Telekom, IBM, from a security and compliance perspective, they're going to have a play as well in terms of that data security layer on top of the actual physical infrastructure. So it does open up opportunity for some of those firms that have been, challenged to scale globally, but have a compliance and security and regulatory focus that, addresses some of those sovereign concerns.